Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Kara Kurtz, and I'm the Business Development Coordinator for both ASTA as well as NACTA. I will be today's organizer for the presentation. We are happy to welcome today's presenter, Jim Smith, SNG Certified Accessible Travel Advocate. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few important features on your screen that will allow you to interact with us via the web. We will be answering your questions at the end of this presentation. To ask a question, you will use your GoToWebinar pane. Near the bottom of this pane, there is an area that says questions. If you click the arrow next to where it says questions, it will open up a window pane. This is what you will use to communicate with me. If you're having trouble hearing the presentation, please make sure your speakers are turned all the way on. Or if you called in, try hanging up and dial back in again. You can send me any technical issues via this questions pane, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Please note that all audience members are muted. We certainly want to hear from you, but we have so many people on today's call that the background noise would be prohibitive, and we want to ensure that everyone can hear the entire presentation. Finally, please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for your on-demand viewing pleasure on our NACTA YouTube channel by early next week. Now let's get started, and it is my pleasure to introduce Jim.
Why, thank you so much, Kara, and good afternoon, unless you're on the West Coast. Good morning still, and if you're in Hawaii, enjoy your Kona coffee. My name is Jim Smith. I'm proud to be both a CTIE, a Certified Travel Industry Executive, as well as an SNG Certified Accessible Travel Advocate. And above all, before anything else, thank you so much for making the time today. What we're going to do is a quick little deep dive, and I'm going to take, just to give you some expectation setting, about 30, 35 minutes of your time for the webinar. We have an hour, but your time's valuable, and it's not how much I can talk in an hour, but how much you can really take away in terms of what we have to offer you. And what we're going to hopefully do is do what we've been doing with our friends at ASTA and NACTA for a lot of years, which is helping to broaden some of your business horizons and take the feel-good of selling travel, especially leisure travel, to a different place. So what we're going to do, again, is right-sizing your expectations right out of the box. We don't want you being medical professionals. I've been in the travel industry for 48 years. I know that being a travel professional is tough enough, but what we want to do is introduce you to the world's fastest growing demographic and show you the most prevalent, the most frequent, common circumstances that you might not be aware of and how to take care of those circumstances, and by doing so, expand your market and enhance your existing sales skills. And everyone, if you go to conferences, tells you have to differentiate from the web, you have to add tangible value. Well, by being able to be more conversant with the special needs market, you'll be able to do just that. And what we're doing today is a jump start, if you will. The program, the certification program, is free. We tried pricing it lower. We just couldn't do it. But it is available. It is online. It is 3 modules. There's a brief test after each module, just to make sure you have the necessary proficiency. The entire running time of the program is 65 minutes. You don't have to take it in one shot. If you have to break it in pieces, whenever you sign out of the program, when you go back in, it's intuitive. It knows where you were. You can go back and review. And the information, at least the high points, we'll be covering today. And if you are certified or if you've taken part of the program, we have a couple of new things we've thrown in since you've probably last seen it, so you might want to stick around. We're going to serve the largest and fastest growing segment of the travel industry a little bit more effectively, because this is a whimsical portrayal, if you will, of the spirit of the average American with disabilities. And we're going to talk about a bunch of different market segments, but this is the disability segment right here that we're going to talk about first. You know, disability, if it's not congenital, if you're not born with it, it tends to do 2 things to people. First, it tends to shut them down a bit, but the human spirit is typified by Disability Dog, is really resilient. We're an amazing bunch, us humans, and some of our friends. Give us a rolly board, some mobility equipment, some munchies, a whimsical scarf. And when you hear about the term experiential travel, this market segment in particular yearns and has a lust for experiential travel. we invite you again to join the over 4,250 SNG certified accessible travel advocates who have successfully completed the program. Included in that would be the entire Celebrity Cruise Line sales team. And just this morning, I did live certification training and testing for the MSC sales team at their national sales meeting. So folks that understand where the market's going have really embraced the cause. And let's talk about what you do for a living, because way back in the day, before computers were in travel agencies, I was sitting behind a desk in a retail travel agency on Long Island. And I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, the job is really comprehensive, because the minute anybody knows you work in the industry, by default, you become an industry ambassador. So you're always representing the industry. Now, these next three, when we talk about values, needs, and problems, I don't care if we're talking about your clients or your suppliers or your spouse or your kids. All of them want you to provide value, fill their needs, and solve their problems. I was never in retail and had the experience where a client walked in and said, I have all the money in the world. I don't care where I go, have at it. It doesn't usually work that way. And when we talk about brand management, many of you may be affiliated with a travel agency, a host, a consortium, or a franchise organization, in addition to your NACTA and ASTA memberships, which are great to support you. But the brand you have to take the most care in managing is you, because you are a brand. If you're out there interfacing with people, believe me, you are your own brand. And I've been privileged throughout my career to work with some of the best salespeople in the business. And one common trait they all share is they ask really great questions. Then they sit back and listen, because good salespeople don't sell anybody anything. What we do is we help people make informed buying decisions. So asking the right questions are critical in sales to begin with. When we talk about these market segments, you might have to ask one or two more questions that you typically might not ask, but we'll get into that. But first, I like to talk about who is the market, okay? Who are these folks? Well, when we talk about the world of disabilities, special needs, and low mobility, we're talking about virtually everyone, families with kids, returning vets, the elderly. You know, you look at pre and post surgical patients, and then you get the occasional, gee, I just wrenched my back, I twisted my knee, I broke my ankle, and dang, I'm going on vacation in a week or two, and I don't think this is going to go down the way I originally envisioned it. And believe it or not, a huge segment of the market that special needs groups serves, and special needs groups in the equipment rental business, and we'll give you a little bit of that in Module 2. But the biggest segment of the market that is really needing this type of service are people we call slow walkers. Because if they have low mobility, then it could be for any one of a variety of reasons. It could be COPD, it could be neuropathy, arthritis, whatever. Their life, when they go on vacation, usually looks a lot different than their normal day-to-day existence. Because if they're still in the workforce, chances are they don't have a very rigorous job. Okay, they're probably sedentary. And if they're home, what do? Maybe go to the store once or twice a week, a doctor's appointment here or there. But when they go on vacation, if they're on a cruise ship, their cabin or stateroom could be on one deck in the one section of the ship, the aft section. And then the, dining room is 9 decks, 10 decks down in the bow, and then the lounge is someplace, and the casino's yet someplace else. And it's the same with some of these large resorts today. By the time you throw in a shore excursion or some afternoon activities, these people could be totally burned out by the time dinner comes, not being able to really enjoy the full vacation experience. And, for vacations and travel to be enjoyable, first it's got to be comfortable. And then we have a totally separate category, those with chronic 24/7, 365 disabilities. We'll talk about them a little in depth. But one thing about disability and special needs, unfortunately, it's equal opportunity. It doesn't care who you are, where you come from, who you love, how you love them, who you voted for, and what you believe in. If disability or special needs want you, they're going to find you. And this segues into something that was truly a watershed event in the United States, and it was the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it was a game changer in so many ways. And if you're going to take the test and get certified, you might want to hang on to the date 1990, the year ADA was enacted. They amended it in 2008, put a little bit more enforceability, some more teeth in it. But at the outset, ADA was created to protect the civil rights of Americans with disabilities and to prohibit discrimination. And in such, it was really closely modeled after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And if you were around the 1990 period, and you remember the United States and what we looked like back then physically, it's a very different environment than it is today. Because back in 1989 and in the early 90s, when everyone was getting ready to comply with ADA, we didn't have cutouts and street corner curbs, so people that were in mobility equipment like wheelchairs, scooters, or power chairs could do something as simple as cross the street. We didn't have ramps going into buildings, only stairs in many cases. We didn't have handicapped or accessibly friendly parking spaces outside retail establishments. And we sure didn't have grab rails in restrooms or in hotel showers. So what ADA basically did is it said we have to remove the physical barriers that are impeding this market segment from enjoying full and complete lives. Made sense. And then again, it prohibits discrimination at a very high level because you need a medical degree to really get into the full breadth and scope of disability and special needs. But at a very high level and where it impacts you on a daily basis, when you're interacting with clients, let's break it into two categories. There's physical disabilities, or as we say, visual disabilities that you can see. And if you're engaged and if you're in the moment and you're dialed in, it's pretty easy to detect someone that has either mobility, sight, hearing, or speech issues. But, you know, I was a medic in the Navy at the tail end of Vietnam, and I happened to be a disabled vet myself. And we used to joke when we were working at the Navy Regional Medical Center in Philly that just because you don't see the disability doesn't mean it's not there. So you can also have emotional disabilities. They're in many cases invisible, and that can include nervous disorders, learning disorders like, I call it the alphabet series, the ADDs, the ADHDs, and so many maladies that we experience that don't physically manifest. Also, unfortunately, included in this category are addictive disabilities, and that's rearing a really nasty, ugly head. So the scope and the breadth of disability is pretty profound. And this is just good to know information, not testable, but it's good to know that ADA in the United States mandates access to the workplace. So if you're working in an office building or an office environment, it should be accessible if required. Government services, everything from City Hall to the Department of Motor Vehicles, public and commercial facilities, everything from restaurants to strip malls to shopping malls, bars, bowling alleys, bam, in that loop. Telecom services have to provide relays and other forms of technology to assist the hearing and visually impaired. And then you have enforcement. Now, anything that's public transportation, public facilities, buildings, whatever, has to be accessible. So that could be the New York subway system. It could be MARTA in Atlanta. It could be that little electric train that takes you from downtown Seattle to the site of the World's Fair and the museum that's really funky over there. It could be Disney's monorail. If it's public, it needs to be accessible. And the government does provide assistance and training because they don't expect companies to figure this out on their own. And the enforcement of the ADA is overseen by not one, but two departments of government, Justice and Transportation. And, you know, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. But here we get into the business side of the equation that I'd like to speak to a little bit. You know, people often refer to the disability and special needs market as a niche. These numbers just reflect Americans with 24/7, 365 disabilities. Roughly 20% of the population, almost 63 million people. Now, I hate to be argumentative, but you give me 63 million of anything, and that's not a niche. That's a whole bunch. Heck, I'd take an enroll change. So we're talking about a huge chunk of the population. This is just disability. And these numbers are test-worthy, and they've since risen. There was some recent research that's come out, but for testing purposes, this is what you want to hang on to. The disability market alone possesses an annual discretionary income, $220 billion, And of that annually, 13.6 billion spent on vacations, which translates to 32 million vacations a year, just from the disability market alone. Now, the crazy stat in all of this is that 24 million Americans with disabilities have responded in surveys saying they would travel or travel more frequently if somebody just met their needs. Now, by and large, these aren't folks that are looking for a 7-category upgrade on a 6-category ship, nor are they looking for a $500 onboard credit for the $299 inside cabin they just purchased. They just really want to be taken care of. And, you know, disabilities can be, how can we put it, off-putting. It can throw people off their stride, if you will, because sometimes it's just not easy to deal with, especially if you haven't been trained. And the only advice I can give you in this regard is because travel people tend to be empathetic people. The first reaction, if you see somebody with a physically pronounced disability, might be something like, oh, gee, you poor thing, are you okay? Well, folks, not to be flippant, they're okay, you're not, because they've acquiesced and they've acclimated. And all these individuals want, individually and collectively, because I've been around this segment my entire life, is to be treated like everybody else. They want your care, they want your concern, they want your respect, they want your expertise. And, you know, to service their needs effectively, you might need to ask 1 or 2 additional questions, but treat them like you would anybody else. Important to know that the disability market specifically does not usually travel by themselves. 85% of those 32 million trips are taken with other people. And this doesn't even include special needs. Disability is interesting. You know, it takes in everybody and anybody, but it does impact 1 in 5 families in the United States, 1 in 5 households, providing, here comes the kicker, providing no household member is 65 or older, because, you know, these things that house our spirits and our souls and our beings, these things we call bodies, they're nothing but machines. And if you've owned a machine for any period of time, it needs more tender loving care and maintenance and tends to be more prone to breakdown. So the kicker here is that the minute one individual in a household turns 65 years old, that incidence of disability jumps from 1 in 5 households to 1 in 4. And you might say to yourself, okay, Jim, listen, 1 in 5 is 20%, 1 in 4 is 25%. That's a 5% spread or difference. It's not that big a deal. At face value, it really isn't, but when you take that 5% and apply it to the number of households in this country, it's really a significant deal. And then there's another market segment that technically I should be part of. I steadfastly refuse to join these people. You're only young once, you can be immature forever, but the mature Americans take another 340 million trips a year. And the reason we're bringing this into play for you is because when you're putting down your most basic or your most intricate business plan, your sales plan, your marketing plan, understanding what you're passionate about, what you enjoy selling, who are your best prospects, who you're most likely to close and connect with and have as good clients. You know, when I was a retail travel agent, there were 2 attributes a client could have that made me love that client before I even met that client. And those 2 attributes were time and money. And these 2 market segments, disability special needs lopped as one, and the mature market, they have both. Because smack in the middle of all this mess is my generation, the baby boomers. And these are some staggering numbers because the baby boom generation was born between January 46 and December of 64. Over 85 million in North America, 74 million down here in the States, another 11 million up north in Canada. And beginning January 1st, 2011, over 7 years ago now, we started turning 65 generationally at the rate of 10,000 a day. And that continues to December 31st, 2030, which makes it the world's largest growing demographic. Now, those are the demographics, but the psychographics behind the baby boomer market are even more compelling because we were the first generation that grew up with travel as a birthright. I remember taking a flight with my mom back in 1963 from Phoenix to New York, and you would have sworn everybody on that plane was going to either a wedding, weekend religious services, or a funeral, because everybody was dressed to the nines. Now, today, in 2018, about the only people dressed like that are travel professionals hoping to get upgraded to first class. Everybody else is in yoga pants and shorts and flip-flops and what have you. So we grew up traveling. The Airline Deregulation Act of 78, 79, sort of that. We also were the generation that was marketed to by Burger King in the 70s with the slogan, "Have it your way." And we said, what? Wait a minute. We don't have to have it the way you've been telling us we have to have it. We can have it personalized to our own taste. Oh, cool. We like that. Here we are, 2018. You can personalize anything. I have placemats, coasters, even have a blanket on my bed with various pictures of my 25-year-old twins at different life stages. So, yeah, we want personalized experiences. And, 60 is the new 40, except for the knees and the feet. Well, we're living longer, we're living better, but our bodies are breaking down. As a matter of fact, down here in South Florida, where I live, 3 years ago, watching the NFL playoffs, the most frequently rotated commercial, and it was a local buy, it wasn't a national advertising buy, was for the Stryker prosthetic knee. So, yeah, pre- and post-surgical patients are great targets. And that's the end of Jumpstart to Module 1. And again, I'm going to tell you it's critical to ask the right questions, because you could be selling somebody that's not an experienced traveler and say to them, listen, I'm going to send you on a cruise out of Port Everglades, great ships down there, and we're going to do a pre or a post, whatever you like, at this really cool oceanfront hotel in Hollywood. It's right down the block, about maybe 8 miles from the port. And that person that you're speaking to, that client or prospect, might say, oh, cool, an oceanfront hotel. I'm going to see the ocean, because an oceanfront hotel is an oceanfront hotel. It's an oceanfront hotel unless there are rooms on the other side. Now, here at the Diplomat in Hollywood, Florida, if you happen to not be on the ocean side, you do get a lovely view of the Intercoastal, Broward County, out to the Everglades. So, yeah, it's not terrible, but you're not looking at the ocean. And the reason we use that slide just to set up the equipment portion of the show is because you might look at this top row of images here and you might say, okay, a wheelchair is a wheelchair and a scooter is a scooter. And this third image that has this joystick thing over here, that's pretty much, they're all alike. And then you have walkers and rollators, and the difference between the two of those is the rollator has 4 wheels, a couple of handbrakes, and even has a little seat here that you can flip down, and if you're a little winded, you can take a breather. And a beach wheelchair, which is, it's a whole nother story. That thing's amazing. But the interesting thing about it when you're selling cruises is that any client that's in a power chair, see, all these chairs come in 3 sizes: standard, heavy duty, bariatric being the largest. And as you'll note, they're all rated by weight capacity. But here's the kicker. You're selling a cruise, somebody's in a power chair, I don't care what size that power chair might be, that power chair needs an accessible cabin because it's too wide to fit through a standard cabin doorway. The person using that piece of equipment might not need all the amenities and features of that accessible cabin, but the equipment has to go in that cabin. It's not going to fit. The same applies to only the heaviest of the scooters and the wheelchairs. The bariatric scooter, the bariatric wheelchair, both require accessible cabins. And that's important because, I've dealt with clients just about my entire life, one kind of client or another. But I know when you're selling vacations, you put the right client in the wrong cabin, it's a long day at the beach for you. You put the wrong client in the wrong cabin, there's hell to pay. So this is really just critical information to know. Walkers do come in a couple of different sizes, rollators also. Joy on the Beach comes in a duffel bag. It takes me 2 minutes to assemble it. I'm technically reclined. I'm a sales and marketing guy. Average person puts it together in under 2 minutes. The frame is made of extruded aluminum, same thing they make planes from, so it's lightweight and very durable. The mesh is very strong, but it's really comfortable and it's quick drying. And these big oversized yellow wheels are pre-filled with air. Now, the major difference between this piece of equipment and the 3 above it is the 3 above it don't really do well in sand at all. However, this particular beach wheelchair, you just need a companion to gently tilt the chair back. And ladies and gentlemen, those big yellow wheels cut through sand like a hot knife goes through warm butter. And when you get to see the expression on an individual's face that might not be ambulatory, that could be chair-bound, bedridden, whatever the situation is, and they've always had a dream of putting their toes in the water or their toes in the sand, And you see the expression on their face when those toes hit the water. Trust me, it takes the feel good of what we do as travel professionals to a different dimension. Now, there's 3 different sizes of wheelchairs, but it's important to know that you have 2 different types. Self-propelled is self-explanatory, basically. You can either turn the wheels or you can be like Fred Flintstone and paddle at your feet. Whereas the companion to transport chair doesn't offer the user the ability to wheel themselves. And if you're in this thing, chances are you're not doing a Fred Flintstone. So you don't have the large wheels, and the other feature is that the attendant or the companion does have the handbrake for a little bit of assistance if going downhill. If you're ever selling clients on Cunard and they are in standard staterooms, Cunard mandates that the clients use a foldable scooter which accommodates up to 250 pounds, relatively lightweight, and you can fit about 4 of these things in your average trunk of your car. They're really great on flat surfaces. I wouldn't recommend them for the cobblestone streets of Portland, Maine, or most of Europe. But on flat surfaces, they give you a solid ride. And, you know, it's really interesting when we look at the world of special needs, and we're closing out just about on the equipment slide now. A lot of folks travel with medication that requires refrigeration. And they and you might think, well, you know, their stateroom on the ship has a minibar, or the sleeping room at the resort or the hotel has a minibar. That'll work. Not necessarily, because some medications require refrigeration at temperatures that have to be sustained, and that's not within the specs of a lot of the minibars. So mini refrigerators, if you have folks traveling with medication that requires refrigeration, could be a big game changer for you. And like you can see on the screen, we don't have to play read along entirely, but just about anything, with the exception of dialysis, can be accommodated by us. There is one product I would like to call your attention to, because unfortunately too many people we know are affected by this. Anyone with autism, or if they're undergoing chemotherapy, one of the side effects is a condition called metal mouth, where everything you eat tastes like tin or aluminum, and it's just not even fun to even attempt to eat, and particularly with both of those patient categories, with autism and particularly with chemotherapy patients, maintaining their nutrition is critical. Mirror Burst are natural berries, and you eat one of these things, and they taste pretty good, actually. And within 30 seconds, any food you subsequently eat is palatable. So it is really a potential game changer for folks that have those unfortunate situations that they have to confront. And we just added it to the inventory within the last year, and it's very popular. We work with the cruise lines. Many of them refer us, and where they can come in very handy for you is the major cruise lines have access departments. So if you have clients with special needs, mobility issues, breathing issues, respiratory, the access departments can really be helpful in identifying which shore excursions the lines offer might be best suited to these clients. A little bit about Special Needs Group. Our footprint is global. The company is 11 years old at the 10-year mark last Valentine's Day. How sweet. We serviced over 500,000 customers at that point, and 500,000 happy customers, actually. And the footprint has expanded to include 215 metropolitan areas in 68 countries. That would also include places that don't have a lot of water around them, like Las Vegas and Orlando. But safe to say, wherever there's a cruise port, we can not only take care of the port, we can take care of the city and the surrounding area. And if you have a client going to a really offbeat destination, we have our concierge service for those particular situations. Now, that's 2 out of 3. Here comes 3. One slide on Module 3. We're coming into the home stretch, folks. In Module 3, what we did was call upon our travel agent partners that are real specialists in this market, along with our supplier buddies who focus on the special needs market and our own life experiences. And in Module 3, you'll listen and you'll watch images on the screen to 4 different scenarios where one individual portrays a very accessible, savvy travel counselor. The other individual is either someone with a special need or a disability, one of their loved ones, with some really predictable questions, concerns, and apprehensions. And what we do for you is flush out best practices to show you how to best handle these situations that you're more than likely to come up against. It's my favorite of the three. And you know, in 48 years in this business and 63 years on this planet, I've learned one thing. Never over or underestimate anyone's knowledge. You know, we talked about 24 million Americans with disabilities that would travel more frequently if their needs were met. A lot of people don't travel because they don't believe or they don't know services are available to take care of their needs. So what I'm going to ask you to do is for either the next 30, 60, 90, 15, whatever, just pick a number and stick with it. When you're interfacing with repeat clients and you're verifying right at the top of the call their contact information, just in case you get disconnected, or if you have a new client and you're capturing contact information at the top of your interaction, before you get into where do you want to go, where have you been, what do you like to do, how much you want to spend, before we get into any of the vacation qualifying and probing, ask just one question. Does anybody in your party require mobility or oxygen assistance? Because we've had agents tell us that they've done this exact scenario, they've integrated the question in, and they've gotten back something to the effect of, well, you know, Aunt Edna wanted to go on the family reunion with us, but she uses oxygen and she wasn't going to go. Well, folks, if Aunt Edna doesn't go, guess who else isn't going? Uncle Ed, her husband. And if they don't go, there's a very good chance their three kids and the spouses of those three kids don't go either because mom and dad aren't going. So by asking one very simple question, and the reason we say this is the question to ask, is after conducting an analysis of the first 10 years and 500,000 orders, while special needs group is and special needs at sea can service a broad range of special requests, 97.8% of them came down to mobility or oxygen. So if you can integrate that one question before you get into the where to's and how muches, you might uncover a whole bunch of new potential clients. And even if you've been dealing with people for 20 years, life changes. Trust me. A little bit more about Special Needs Group. Tell you about our footprint. We make it super easy for the client. The equipment's delivered directly to their stateroom. If we have a kiosk at that particular terminal, and we do it several, they'll have the option of getting the equipment there and taking it up to their stateroom. Otherwise, the cruise line has the responsibility to get them to their stateroom. Once they're in the stateroom, they have their equipment. They use it on board. They can take it off ship on excursions. And when it's time to disembark, they leave it exactly where they found it. And a hotel will give you the heads up. Typically, it's either front desk, concierge, or bellman. And we are trusted by the major cruise lines to serve their guests. We're referred by them. And we're just jazzed that so many of them are now adopting our certification program, not only for their sales team, but also call center personnel. So this is finally catching on. At Special Needs Group, we work extra hard to meet special requests. So if it's not something that's in our normal routine, we'll go out of our way to find it. And if we can't, we'll point you in the right direction. Two good pieces of news. You earn commission on every rental. And we're not in the agency business. We'll never compete for your clients. Quite frankly, we'd rather do business with you than them. To do business with us, just go to specialneedsgroup.com, go to the agent tab, or go /agents. Use whatever industry identifier you use to claim commissions and register with us. Where we're a lot different than a lot of suppliers is once we get your email address, we don't want to be your inbox's best buddy. We're going to email you once a month, okay? And along with any commissions. Once you've registered, you can then take the certification program, and there's a host of benefits that we make available to all of our registered agents, the least being a resource center with sales and marketing materials to help you more effectively develop and service the market. Anything you see in red right now, and this site is ugly, we're in the process of redoing it, but anything currently displays in red is exclusive to our certified accessible travel advocates. So if you have access to it, enjoy it. If you don't, get your certification, please. It's good stuff. I mentioned that we'd rather do business with you than with consumers. I wasn't kidding. These are really separate screens if you look at them, but for the sake of expediency, we combine them on one slide. This is the rental screen on the left, you see. And consumers can hit this, but we ask them, you need assistance in booking your vacation? click here for one of our certified accessible travel advocates. They're taken to this screen, they pop in their zip code, they set their mileage default, and we spit them back all the certified accessible travel advocates within those parameters. So it's fun when we do trade shows and conferences and agents come up to us thanking us for the business. It's pretty cool. We have the sales and marketing guide where we try to show real life people using the equipment in real life situations, and this is available in the Resource Center. On the website, if you go about 5 tabs in, you'll see a cruise accessibility option. If you click that, you'll get a display of the major cruise lines. Let's say you click on one line like Norwegian, you'll get a separate screen and you'll see all the ships in their fleet. And if you want to see a specific ship, what you'll get on this last image is everything about that ship except pricing and itinerary, because that's way too dynamic. But we'll tell you when it was built, how many cabins, restrooms, dining rooms, whatever. Stuff you can find in a million different places. But what we tell you that you can't find every place else or any place else are all the accessibility features of the vessel, how many accessible staterooms, any special accessibility features, and what that particular vessel within that fleet can accommodate. It's a pretty nifty little bookmark. If you ever see us at a conference, and actually, this is our very first Scooting for Charity at a NACTA annual conference back in 2012 down here at the Westin in Fort Lauderdale. And there's beloved Bob breaking every rule in the book, got his legs outside the vehicle. He was the operator, and I know he was distracted. But the real goal of this is to put you behind the wheel of a mobility scooter and make believe you're at the Winter Olympics and they're doing the slalom where you got to go through all those gates. Well, we did something with a very rudimentary track, and when you get to the end of it, you get to make a U-turn. It's really tight and come back. The charity portion is always optional, but the experience opens a lot of eyes, and it's a whole bunch of fun. And last but not least, we are pleased and proud to be the official mobility and special needs partner for ASTRA and NACTA. It's a privilege that we don't take very lightly at all. So with that, I'd like to say thank you and call your attention to the fact that if you need to reach us by email, our travel industry ambassador team, Jimmy and Denitza, and a few others, they're fabulous people, but we give them days off and occasionally they get sick and take vacations. But the email box, agents@specialneedsgroup.com, is constantly monitored. The website's www.specialneedsgroup.com. We do offer 24-hour emergency service. In the event people forget to plug in their scooters overnight and charge them, which is the biggest call we get, and the 800 number's there. And the last thing I'd like to mention before I flip it back over to Kara, we're different. We've been able to institute a lot of agent-friendly and beyond agent-friendly programs. And it's quite possible you can ask the questions I'm asking you to ask your clients, and you might end up with a client whose needs are outside your comfort zone to effectively service, and that's okay. We're here to help. We tell you to just get that client's contact information, find out the best time for us to reach them, call us with your contact information, the client, and the best time to call. The team will give that client a call, assess that client's needs. If the client would like, we'll gladly take their reservation and their money. And as soon as we hang up with them, we're contacting you with a phone call and a written confirmation as to what your client just booked and how much commission you're going to make. And it's going to be the full commission amount. Because the president of the Special Needs Group, Andrew Garnett, is committed to delivering an accessible world. And you can reach a lot more people than we can. And, you know, my heart and soul are with the agency community. An old girlfriend once remarked she knew how I was going to die. I said, really, Karnak, how's that? She said, you're going to take a bullet for a travel agent. I said, very possible. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to kick it open to questions and answers with one last thought. There is no such thing as a stupid question, just dumb answers. So don't worry about your job. I'll try to do mine. Kara?
Thank you so much, Jim. So we already have a few questions coming in. Before I get started, we do have someone that wanted to say thank you so much for all of this fabulous information.
Oh, so you're more than welcome. It's my privilege.
Okay, so our first question, it looks like we have a member who is 86 years old. She,
God bless you.
She wants to go on a small ship, but is afraid of falling during the passage because she has back problems and uses a cane. She wants to know how she can convince the cruise line to accept her, and she's asking for your help.
Well, see, here's the challenge. When you say small ships, if I take a leap of faith and say riverboats, because they are really the only real logistical challenge that exists for mobility equipment, and specifically because when those ships are sailing the rivers of Europe or the Mekong Delta or wherever they're sailing, many times in a city, unlike the big blue water ships that, berth bow to stern, they're going 2 and 3 abreast. And it's physically very difficult sometimes for them to get the equipment and the guest across 3 ships shoreside. That is the biggest challenge that we find. Now, that when it comes to oxygen, that's no problem on the small ships like the riverboats. What I would tell you is this. Riverboats in Europe are challenging. Riverboats in the United States must comply with ADA. So that could be an option for you. And when you're talking about the blue water ships that sail the oceans and the seas, the majority of them, I know even Paul Gauguin, they have 1 or 2 accessible cabins. They don't have a lot, but they do exist. So I'm more than sure if you talk and ask for either the access department or someone in guest services at that cruise line, they'll be more than happy to help you. And if you're unsuccessful after you've done that, my direct number, and like I say, I'm just a consultant to these guys, but you let me know if you're having a problem. My direct number is 561-362-3887, and I'll see whatever I can do to help you get a favorable outcome. It might not be the one you're looking for, but we can always look to flesh out options.
Thank you so much, Jim. We have another question, and it is how much to rent a wheelchair on a cruise, and how much would the insurance be for it if anything happens?
That's a really good question, and here's the answer. One you're not going to like, one you're going to love. The pricing varies from locations and the size of the equipment. That's number one. Now, what I can tell you is that your typical scooter, your standard scooter for a week out of South Florida or Orlando, Port Canaveral, is about $185, and obviously the wheelchairs will be less than that, but they don't let me get involved with the operations side of the business because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm operationally reclined. Now, the really good news and the answer you're going to love is that unlike other companies in this space, and there aren't a lot of them, our insurance, our loss and damage coverage is included in the price. And that's all commissionable to you, no NCFs. So, with some companies are out there that might do this stuff, and you might get a price for $165, and then the yak gets $10 or $15 a day on the insurance coverage. No, we don't do that.
All right. And I think that is it for all of our questions today.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you, Kara. Thanks for your time. It's your most valuable commodity. In closing, all I can say is on behalf of Andy, the ambassadors, and warehouse and delivery people in 215 metropolitan areas in 68 countries, good luck, good health, and happy selling. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. And wait, before we log off, Jim, it looks like we had another question come in last minute.
Yep, sorry, too late. Jim's already on vacation. What do you got?
Do you have access to a wheelchair reservations at the port?
Yeah, sure. Well, let's put it this way. Depends on the port. But can we arrange for it at the port? I'm really unclear on the question. If we could get a little more clarity. But let's put it this way. Our offices, the headquarters of the company, are about 10 minutes from Port Everglades. And we've had, I can't tell you how many calls, but it's probably in the thousands by now, when clients come to Port Everglades and they're on the Allure, the Oasis, or the Harmony, or whatever's in port that's equal to that size or big. And I can't tell you the calls they get at the office from consumers. I had no idea the ship was this big. Is there any way I can get a wheelchair or a scooter? And we get a lot of those every weekend. And that's a shame. That's money on the table.
So it looks like this question is pertaining particularly to Antarctica because it's very slippery there due to the ice.
Well, you might need to contact the office on this one. I'll give you my best shot. What do you got?
Okay. So, the question in regards to getting wheelchair accessibility at the ports.
I am going to defer to people that know better than I, and I'd suggest just call 800-513-4515, and you can hit extension 1027, and that is Jimmy Varela. He's our senior travel industry ambassador. And Jimmy, if he doesn't have the answer off the top of his head, we'll get back to you with an answer that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a privilege to do this for my friends at Astor and NACTA. Are you kidding me? Besides, I'm a lonely old guy. I had nothing else to do on a Friday. Just kidding. It's always fun.
I promise.
That's
so
okay.
We have a member who just recently turned 74.
Congratulations.
They've turned into a slow walker. No shame in that. And
nope.
When they were in Italy, they were on a cruise ship and they found many kinks. They would not let this member rent a scooter that could be kept on the ship. Is there an alternative arrangement that could have been made? And when will facilities in Europe possibly be changed?
Okay. I can't imagine a blue water big ship that wouldn't allow a scooter on board. I haven't heard of those, quite honestly. But I'm always open to learning new things. So if you could just in the chat box let Kara know the cruise line, and Kara, if it's one of the riverboats, that is a challenge, as I mentioned earlier. What I can tell you is that being involved in this community, I do know that the United Nations World Tourism Organization, in conjunction with the International Bureau of Standards, and the International Bureau of Standards enact standards. They're not laws, but they are standards that they suggest countries comply with so that folks can have a relatively seamless experience wherever they go. I know that it is on the agenda to discuss not standards, but global compliance with some form of ADA. In Barbados, for example, there's a program called Accessible Barbados. A year and a half ago, there was a one-day accessibility summit in the Bahamas, in Nassau, for all the Bahamian hoteliers, destination management companies, and myself and a few of my colleagues. I pulled a few folks together from Royal Caribbean and Disney and some other folks, and we went down there and conducted seminars and panel discussions because many of the Caribbean destinations are recognizing now that they have to embrace this market segment because there's a real financial compelling reason. I mean, I remember when ADA was passed, I sat on the advisory board of a number of hotel chains, and privately, there was a lot of moaning that all this extra cost, we got to put in ramps, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. And that moaning stopped the minute the revenue started turning from this market segment. So what was originally, perceived as, gee, we got to do this, it's like, okay, how do we do this better? So I think what you're going to see, and there are a lot of organizations pushing this needle, we're one of them, is for global standards and hopefully soon, at least in the next decade, global compliance. I think that's the likelihood.
Thank you so much, Jim. Okay, so reverting back to the first part of the question, it looks like this wasn't a river cruise. It was actually an ocean ship.
Wow. That's a new one on me. Sheesh. I tell you what, you can always, if you want to email me directly on this one, this is really cool. Not really, but I've never heard of this one. Jim at Jim Smith, CTIE, like Certified Travel Industry Executive. So it's Jim at JimSmithCTIE.com. I don't believe in websites. I use Facebook and LinkedIn, but it was great to have my own URL. I don't need a website. Not at this stage of the game. I can barely keep up with my Facebook. So, folks, you have my contact information. If I can ever be of personal assistance, don't hesitate.
All right, Jim. And before we go ahead and let you go, one last question from our viewers. Are there any offices in Europe at the ports in London?
No, we don't. We have our office in Italy and Naples, but London and Barcelona and the 4 port cities in Italy really constitute a huge chunk of the business. So we have very, very good relationships with our agents at those ports.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. I'm sure that we'll have a few members reaching out to you. This was a very informative webinar, and it looks like our agents really enjoyed it.
Listen, glad to brighten your Friday, folks. Thanks so much. Have a super weekend.
With that said, as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar was recorded, so if you would like to listen to this presentation again, or you happen to log on halfway through, this will be available for your viewing pleasure by mid-next week on NACTA YouTube channel. Again, thank you, Jim, and to our partners at the Special Needs Group, as well as to all of you who joined us for today's webinar. This will conclude today's presentation, and we hope everyone has an amazing weekend. Thank you.